What's happening, everybody? It's Eric J. Olson for another live edition of the Managing Partners podcast. And today, all the way from Portland, Oregon, I have Andrew Schpak, who is already having one of those days. Now, here in Virginia, it's 12:35 p.m., which means for him, it's 9:35. And you know what happens when you have one of those days. But hopefully, his day is going to improve because he is our next guest on the Managing Partners podcast. What's up, Andrew?
Hey there, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So is everything cool now? We're good?
We've got this. It's all neatly scheduled. It's all good.
I love it. Now it's kind of a pre-planned thing for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I got you. Hey, great backdrop there. What are we looking at? Is this downtown Portland?
Yeah, I'm right downtown. That's the West Hills. So about an hour that way is the Oregon coastline. And about an hour east is Mount Hood, which is sort of the way that I'm facing right here. So kind of halfway between those two destinations. Very nice.
Very nice. Well, cool, man. Hey, I appreciate your time. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your firm does.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Andrew Schpak. I'm an employment lawyer, do advice and litigation work, mainly representing management and everything. I basically call it drama in the workplace, discrimination, harassment, retaliation, but everything that comes up between an employer and employee, classification issues, pay issues, you name it. And I work at a boutique labor and employment firm. We have about 24 attorneys total, and all we do is labor, employment, and benefits. So very specialized place. We just take up one floor of a building in downtown Portland. We only have one office, and so we really like how much we're specialized, and we are very niche, but very strong group size-wise for being such a specialty team.
So employment law, yeah, I'm guessing every once in a while there's drama in the workplace.
Yep, every once in a while.
And I'm also guessing that over the course of the last year to year and a half, it's been quite interesting for you, has it?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was businesses having to abruptly shut down. And what does that mean for how they deal with their employees and their workforce and the orders and the vendors? While we were shut down for much longer than expected, businesses had to think about, well, do we need to shut down entirely? Do we actually have to fully lay off some people who were just sort of on leave for a period of time? And now we're in the happier part, which is trying to reconcile CDC guidance with state guidance about masks and vaccination and basically how to pave the way for a safe return to the office.
Actually, that is interesting. That came up recently here. For my company. So everyone, most people are working remote. I'm in the office, but we were wondering, do people have to get vaccinated, generally speaking, to come back to the office? Is that kind of at the discretion of the employer?
That is a hot question right now. And the short answer is most people think that you can say you need to get vaccinated so long as you have exceptions available for people who either have health objections, like they would have a serious allergic reaction to a vaccination, or else a religious objection to getting a vaccination. There's this small argument that the only reason why these vaccines are actually on the market now is it's called an emergency use authorization. Basically, the FDA accelerated what they did to get it on the market faster. And part of that EUA says you cannot force someone to get this vaccine because it's been accelerated and it hasn't gone through the full process. So right now we're actually in this spot where technically there's an argument that someone could say, this isn't even authorized for full use. You can't force me to get it and threaten to fire me if I don't. But I've heard that it's expected to get full authorization this summer. So that'll probably take the final argument off the table for being able to have a mandatory vaccine policy if you want to have one.
That's interesting. I've heard people just that I know mention that it's not FDA approved. And I think that's kind of interesting considering over 100 million Americans have been vaccinated to this point. But I had not heard of that. And that's kind of the reason for why they don't want to get vaccinated. But right. I hadn't heard of that being a reason for, having to do anything with employment or whether employees get the vaccine or not.
Most of them are just really encouraging vaccination, maybe even incentivizing by saying, hey, you can take paid leave to go get it, and some people are even doing kind of other forms of incentives to get the vaccine, but very few are actually doing a hard mandatory. There's a couple higher ed institutions in state here that are making that move, basically saying if you want to come back to campus as a college student, you need to be vaccinated.
Interesting. We have a question here from Adam Williams. Did you do other types of law before moving to niching to a specific, well, to specific law, but employment law? If so, what kind?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I'm a K through JD. And I thought I wanted to do constitutional law. I thought constitutional law was super interesting, sort of how the country operates. And so in undergrad, I was a poli-sci major and I studied constitutional law. And then when I went to law school, a lot of it was just the Commerce Clause. There was a lot about constitutional law that I didn't end up liking or didn't feel like it clicked with me. So I sort of took a step back and took a wide range of classes in a lot of different areas in law school. And employment law was one that I didn't expect to be so interesting. But, it really is people-oriented. It's about not just what does the law say about what you can and can't do, but, so much about what's not against the law in the workplace is what makes someone feel uncomfortable or harmed or offended or no longer welcome. And so it's a fine line about, did you break the law versus, did you make someone feel like they're not welcome or not happy here? So it's an interesting kind of sociology meets law area for me. And so once I took that class, I thought it was very interesting. So I took a couple other classes in that area. And by the time I graduated, I was really just looking for workplaces where I could focus on it. So I would say I knew pretty soon. I had a lot of friends who kind of ended up at a law firm based on where they had need, as opposed to what law they wanted to practice. But I sort of sought out a firm that was doing the type of law that I thought was interesting in law school.
It makes a lot of sense. That's smart too. Yeah. Versus just kind of like happening into a law firm or a practice area. You actually had a plan going in. That's nice and smart. Cool. So let's talk about maybe like some trends that you're seeing, maybe specifically in employment law and in the workforce. Certainly, I would imagine remote work is pretty hot topic for you these days, and how that's going to continue or not continue at individual companies. I think this would be interesting for any other managing partner because, well, you probably have lawyers and employees that are on staff. If you're watching and this is something you need to be aware of. So yeah, what kind of trends are you seeing as far as like the remote work goes and everything else that has to do with employment law these days?
Yeah, the remote work, it's been fascinating. As lawyers, we're frankly pretty privileged. Most of us have been able to practice relatively effectively remotely as compared to a lot of other professions. I do know certain areas of the law, for instance, family law, certain areas where they really rely on trial practice for a lot of their work and income. They have had some struggles in some cases. But, in terms of kind of trends, I would say that remote work is probably the biggest one that we're all looking at, right? Because in many ways, the pandemic accelerated it. We all knew that there was going to be more demand for this. And frankly, we all had some people who were doing maybe flexible schedules or something like that. But all of a sudden, everyone was forced to basically go 100% remote to the extent possible. Mm-hmm. And the analysis is totally different now in terms of saying, hey, we want you to come back. It's safe. Because number one, everyone's got a different definition of what is safe. And number two, a lot of people have gotten really comfortable at home and have questions about, well, why do I need to? And, depending on where you live, tax questions about, what city and county you live in versus work in, and would it be cheaper for me to work from home? We're right near the border of Washington where there's no income tax. So if you live and work in Washington and don't set foot in your Portland office, you save, a fair amount in state income taxes for that time worked over there. So on top of that, there's all these adaptations to kind of new life, with shortened school days, people having to work with kids and sort of cover for them more than they had in the past. There's been a lot of moving parts, and I think it's going to be hard. To your point, there are a lot of culture-driven firms, and our firm is very culture-driven, and I think we've done our best to stay connected without being pesky in terms of our staff and associates and partners. But we're really looking forward to having people back because, we'll have a lunch where everyone sits around our big conference room table and catches up and talks about stuff. And we just haven't been able to have that same type of connection during Zoom.
Totally agree. Yeah, we used to do company lunch. We've been doing that for many, many years. So just every 2 weeks we go out and the company pays for it. And it's just a nice bonding opportunity and just kind of hang out. And then we stopped doing that at the beginning of the pandemic. And then maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, we realized, well, hey, we could actually do this outside. And so we just started to go to restaurants at first where there was outdoor seating and everyone felt comfortable. And now it's, it's just kind of, we go wherever we want to at this point. Like, certainly seems like people are kind of letting their guard down. Actually, that's an interesting, maybe topic that you've had some exposure to. So well, how about like the liability for businesses at this point, right? So like, let's say as a business, I kind of let my guard down because the world's starting to return to normal.
Absolutely.
And say everybody come back in, and especially if I force them to come back in, could I be potentially liable if they get sick with coronavirus or anything else?
I mean, absolutely and easily. And that's one of the things we didn't talk about mandatory vaccinations. I mean, you tell someone they have to get vaccinated and they have a terrible allergic reaction, they're going to sue you for saying that you forced them to get vaccinated. So, setting that piece aside, yes, I mean, there's state guidance that evolves constantly, and then there's the federal guidance. But in Oregon, we've been pretty, our state has been pretty locked down. We have no indoor dining at the moment in, the metro area due to numbers. And so, yeah, we've had to be there's a lot of having to reconcile how your business has always operated with what the executive orders say about what you can do. Because if you flaunt those, someone can complain and that puts them in a protected status, even if they have many things wrong with their sort of performance to date. So you do have to be careful. I've handled a number of OSHA sort of complaints that clients have gotten. Oftentimes they're about customers. They're pretty good about what their employees do, but if it's a retail establishment or a restaurant, you might have a customer who doesn't want to put on a mask or refuses to put on a mask or comes in without a mask. And how do you deal with those interactions?
What do you do? Yeah. Are you? Do you always represent the business when it comes to employment law?
We do some non-compete, non-solicit work, which is sometimes individual to company or company to company. So, and we'll sometimes represent some C-suite sort of executives in issues, but for the most part, we represent management. Okay. Portland's a pretty small town, and you'd have employment conflicts of interest pretty fast if you were representing both sides.
Sure. And is your focus mostly on your metropolitan area or kind of statewide?
Yeah, so we view ourselves as regional. I'm licensed in Oregon and Washington. I probably do 25% of my work in Washington, 75% in Oregon. We have people licensed in California, Massachusetts, a few other states around the country, but mostly we're Oregon, Washington regional firm. Work with organizations from one employee to hundreds or thousands of employees, and also work with the fair range of government entities from the state to the counties to city, local entities. So it's a nice range of clients, not many sort of international clients, so mostly national or regional clients, but a good range of size and type.
I gotcha. And how do you go about attracting new clients right now?
That's a great question. I mean, and right now, I guess during the pandemic, because that's even harder. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sort of I'm a bar junkie. I've always been involved with either the local bar association or the state bar association, and now I'm very involved with the American Bar Association. I'm on their board of governors, and I get to know a lot of people that way. Being a boutique firm that only does labor and employment, one of the nice things about that is, my first referrals came from local sources who were specialists in other areas. So for instance, someone who was a family lawyer might have a case that they wanted to refer where an employment issue came up in it. And what's nice about working at a boutique firm is I don't think I present that same threat of I'm going to steal this client from you entirely, since they know exactly what the universe is of the types of services I provide. Right. When they refer it to me, they know I'm just going to work on those pieces and hand it back. Whereas if they look at a corporate firm that does everything, a full service firm, they're going to be worried about referring a client to that type of attorney. So I get a lot of mutual referrals from local referral sources of lawyers who do other types of work. My ABA relationships have, some national connections where, hey, do you know anybody in Portland who does X? I'm sort of someone who's top of mind for some of those conversations. And then, you really hope to build in terms of having my speaking and writing and cases do the work. Long term, I hope more and more the referrals come from a business leader who's talking to another business leader and says, oh, I've got this thing going on. And it's like, oh, well, I used Andrew and he really took care of that in a great and effective way. I'd recommend him. I get those from time to time. That's not my main source, but in my mind, that's sort of what you build towards, is that reputational working for you even when you're not around for the conversation.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, referrals are the best source of business, no doubt, hands down. What I found is that it's difficult sometimes to predict when the referrals will come in and
yes,
turn it on, turn it off, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't want to ever turn it off, but maybe scale back a little bit. But it's one of those things where like you can't predict when it's going to happen. And so obviously you want it when it happens. But we certainly here, like for our own business, we augment the referrals and, taking care of our clients and whatnot. Yep. With things like advertising, social media. Are you doing any kind of like digital marketing or traditional marketing at all?
Yeah, so we do, I mean, basically anybody who's a client or potential client can get on our sort of email list. And so we do e-alerts of sort of changes in Oregon and Washington or national law that's relevant. And then we do an annual labor seminar, which is basically a half day, HR CLE credit type event where a number of our different attorneys. It used to take place at the convention center, and we'd get around 750 people and probably have 8 attorneys talk for somewhere between 20 to 45 minutes each. So everyone gets a lot of CLE credit. It was free to all attendees, and we'd have snacks. But, as an employment lawyer, I feel like I'm in the same category as a family lawyer or criminal lawyer. No one's ever calling me because everything's going well. Something went wrong if they have to call me. And so it's like, hey, how you doing? Always feels a little hollow because I know something's not great in their world to feel like they have to call me in the first place. So it's nice to have that contact where we're connecting without an issue pending that might be a headache for them.
Gotcha. Yeah. And actually, here's a follow-on question. How much digital marketing, if at all, have you been doing since everything went virtual to get clients? That's a great question because, yeah, there was the pre-pandemic days with a lot of face-to-face networking. Absolutely. And then you start going remote and it kind of like went away. Of course, you can do like remote learning sessions, but it's difficult to recreate the networking opportunities online.
It's been eye-opening. I mean, it's a great question because I'll cut to the punchline, which is we've been surprised that it's actually more profitable for us to do our, monthly breakfast, trainings virtually than they ever were to do in person. Because in person, we had to pay for a rental space, and usually we were providing breakfast, and it was at like a nice location near downtown. And when it's virtual, you can charge less, and they're not getting a breakfast. They're not having to go to a hotel space, but they're getting that delivered to them at their desk without potentially having to come into downtown Portland if they're not working downtown. So we've actually gotten pretty amazing attendance to our programs as we've shifted to all digital for our breakfast seminars and trainings and our annual labor seminar we did last year. And we have been partnering a little bit with local HR organizations, the Portland Human Resources Management Association, sort of a target audience for ours since it's all the HR people in the downtown metro area. And so we've been working with them on some programs, and that's also been a great place to sort of connect with people we already know, who we haven't talked to in a while, or make new connections.
There you go. Great. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate your time. I hope this has brought some cheer and joy to the day that started off as well, hey, Andrew, if someone wants to get in touch with you, if they're looking for an employment law lawyer or just want to pick your brain, what's a good place for them to find you?
Yeah, our firm's website is barran.com, and my name is A, and last name SCHPAK at barran.com is my email address. Always happy to answer questions.
Fantastic. All right, I will post your URL to your website in the comments so everyone can see that afterwards. Hey, really appreciate your time. And for anyone else who is watching and is interested in spicing up your law firm marketing, take a look at arraylaw.com. That is the website of my company, the digital marketing agency named Array Digital. We work with law firms just like yours. All right, Andrew. Hey, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, hold on a sec.